Now, moving on, our next session is a fireside chat on the topic, the cloud advantage, cleaner IT and scale. Our speakers for this session are Chris Gates, Group CIO and SVP, Compute Services and Technology Solutions, Allstate Insurance Company. Chris is responsible for leading a global information technology organization with a focus on all computing platforms, cloud automation, and IT service management operations, and for building a foundation for rapid growth. We also have with us this evening Hari Govind, Senior Vice President, Infrastructure Target, an accomplished engineer and product leader. Hari is also a serial entrepreneur. He enjoys guiding people, products, and platforms to accomplish measurable outcomes. Chairing this session is Sudha KV, Vice President, Software Engineering, Dell Technologies. Sudha is an innovator and a technology leader who has helped her company reach new milestones while also supporting initiatives to increase diversity. It's a pleasure to have all of you here with us this evening. And Sudha, I'm going to hand over the mic to you. The floor is all yours.
Greetings, everyone. And thank you, Justin, for the introduction. It gives me immense pleasure to be participating in the nasscom GCC Conclave 2021. You all just heard from Maria Simonson on building a purpose-driven and sustainable organization. She very eloquently spoke about developing and deploying actionable roadmaps to lower the energy-related emissions. She also spoke about sustainability of process, business, and technology use. When we think of sustainability in technology use, what comes to our mind? It's greener IT, right? The IPCC recently published their Climate Change Report 2021, and we have some worrying statistics. It becomes all the more imperative in that light to reduce our carbon footprint and leave a better world for the future generations. Now, that leads me to talk about the topic, the session today that I'm hosting on the cloud advantage, greener IT and scale. As Justin already introduced, we have two industry veterans with us, Hari and Chris. Hari and Chris, welcome to the session. I'm going to ask you to share your perspectives on balancing efficiency and performance as the industry transforms from a pure on-prem to the various states of cloud adoption. To begin with, Hari and Chris, if you can briefly introduce your organization's business and talk about your IT data center footprint, it would be great. Over to you.
Sounds great, Sudha, and thank you for the opportunity. It's exciting to be here. Hello from San Francisco. For anyone who's here in America, they already know Target. Target is America's favorite retailer, serves over 160 million guests each month. Over the last year and a half, our business has taken on new meaning. Our digital business has grown 300%. Our shipped same-day delivery grew 700%. And people across the country have relied on us to help deliver essential supplies and groceries to people's homes and car trunks. So when you talk about our data center footprint, we operate over 1,900 stores across the United States. Over 85% of Americans are within 10 miles from a nearby Target. And this means our data center footprint and our compute footprint is pretty extensive. We run a private cloud on a very elaborate network of enterprise data centers, combined with a near-edge infrastructure that runs in a regional distribution centers, and a far-edge infrastructure that runs in every single store. We also leverage public cloud for scale. Over to you, Chris.
Yeah, so similar to Hari, our business is changing drastically, as well as our customers are expecting a lot of different services from what we do. And from an Allstate perspective, we're an insurance company that historically has provided security and protection for your vehicles and your homes. We're a business that's been around the United States for over 80 years. But our customers' needs are changing drastically. Our customers are expecting to be protected in other ways around things like your identity, things like your device protections, and other businesses. we actually have 13 businesses around the core of our services, which is the original business, which is the auto and home insurance. And from a ability to provide technology for them, today we have 2 main data centers and we have 13 co-location facilities. So there's about 15 in total that we have around the United States. And we are on a significant effort to consolidate them, not only for a greener IT footprint, but for the velocity of our ability to do innovation and be able to bring our family of companies, these 13 brands, together under one pane of glass so that our customers can experience the full benefit of what Allstate has to bring for them. So this is a very important topic for me today, and I look forward to unpacking it with you.
Thank you, Chris. Thank you, Harry. So I'll go straight. I caught on to the word innovation, Chris, when you spoke about it, right? Very important as we move forward in this transformative journey. So let me ask you, what were your considerations when you are moving to the cloud, as to say, and when you have on-prem data centers, you might be having legacy infrastructure. What were the considerations, if I may ask?
I think the considerations that we face, and I think everybody faces, there are about 4 elements that we take a look at. The first and foremost is around security protocols, our operational readiness. Are we ready to support an environment that's different? Our data controls that we have in place to make sure information is stored appropriately. And then finally, quite frankly, it's the financial elements. The cloud brings with it a tremendous amount of efficiencies, but it can also get quite expensive if you're not paying attention to it. So you have to have the rigor in place to be able to do it. And while these are all things you have to consider, they can be addressed and they should be addressed, because you do not want to avoid the cloud because of apprehension or fear. You want to embrace it, but you need to do it in such a way that is easy for the folks that consume our services, our developers, to be able to safely and securely leverage it. Thank
you. Hari, let me come to you with questions about your transformative journey with an added one, right? Chris talked about the security consideration. Can you elaborate a bit on how Target is handling that part when you're transforming?
Yeah, look, overall for us, this is really about architecture. Our unique journey in cloud, started over a decade ago. Target was one of the early businesses that ran their consumer cloud on AWS. And this was over a decade ago. We then moved to IBM Cloud. I think the shift started around 2014. And this is a meaningful lift as we retooled all of our systems, all of our applications, all of our protocols for compliance, for security, and for manageability. We've since learned from this, and today we are a true multi-cloud platform. We use GCP for consumer cloud, we use Azure for enterprise cloud, and we effectively leverage public cloud for scale. But then, it's Target's private cloud continues to serve, nearly 70% of our compute and 80% of our storage needs. When you think about the key topics that I talked about, whether it's portability, manageability, and whether it's security and compliance, the perspective we've taken is, if you build your applications right, and if you have your architecture right, you should be able to run your services everywhere. So when you think about, these tenets of security or compliance, of portability or manageability, they essentially become pretty much, the lowest common denominator that you have to enable across all your environments, right? So it's not enough for you to have a secure public cloud. And just because you believe you're behind a set of firewalls, you think you're secure, but in effect, you're not. So you need the same rigor, the same discipline, the same controls for compliance and for security that's implemented robustly across your entire hybrid cloud infrastructure. And I'm really pleased with how much progress we made over the last few years. And I know we're going to talk about it later when we talk about portability of workloads, elastic infrastructure, and so forth. Our applications essentially run on the same environments, primarily because what we leverage in public cloud is their infrastructure as a service capability. And the target, we built out our own platform as a service layer that completely abstracts everything else and allows the application owners to simply focus on running their binaries, and we can actually push those binaries to public cloud and private cloud in under 5 minutes.
That's fantastic to hear. So, Chris, when I just wanted to switch to you on an important part of it, right? Any transformation, any change is difficult, right? On this path, what were the challenges? Did you have skill challenges? Did you have resistance within your company? What did you see, Chris, in this path? Challenge?
Yeah, I think it's a little bit of anxiety and fear of the unknown. So the apprehension I mentioned causes a lot of folks to apply governance, right? There's a belief that if we have more meetings and more discussions around the particular situation, that we'll be able to become more comfortable with it. But Hari talked about it. The more you're able to templatize that and bring, first understand the anxiety that exists in the supporting functions that we work with, whether it's the compliance function, the audit function, the finance function, whatever the functions are. The more you're able to address their concerns, understand their concerns, and then pull it into a recipe that's repeatable and consistent. That was the barrier we had to get over. We had to be able to demonstrate that we could address their concerns and make it easy for folks to consume. And in the process of doing that, we actually have better traceability now than we've ever had. So the organizations that were the most concerned about our journey to the cloud now absolutely love it, because they can tell, when did we deploy something, where did we deploy it? They have traceability of reports. The consistency that they see now is across our entire fleet that's made the journey to migrate is much better for them. So for us, that was the biggest thing. You'll have other skill gaps in the developers, and you'll have a desire to use a lot of emerging technology, right? So Hari has solved the multi-cloud equation, because your developers will have a desire to use one service or another, which again, until you build the foundation, at least common denominator, to be able to do that, it can become a little bit of a burden to be able to traverse multiple clouds. But the big thing for us was addressing that institutional anxiety around it.
Yeah, that's a very good point. And I will follow that up with a question to Hari, right? While you talked about institutional anxiety, Hari, sometimes there is a bubble of a cost before you start saving money or have efficiencies. Was that an issue at all? How were you able to present business cases in the larger context?
No, I think that is a great point. I mean, I'm going to sort of answer your question, but also sort of build on something Chris mentioned a moment ago, right? Chris talked about efficiency and performance engineering, and this is everything to do with how you manage your costs, right? It's a very, very different construct, right? When you think about how you manage your assets in the private cloud versus how you sweat your assets in the public cloud.
Right.
In a private cloud, you overcapitalize your hardware, right? Because the lead times are long. They're often measured in blocks of months, right? It might take a quarter to rack up servers. It might take a couple of quarters. And now with sort of the supply chain concerns we're seeing, and we'll probably continue to see. And I think, Sudha, I think from Dell, you must be all aware of it, right?
Yes,
we're definitely experiencing it.
Yeah.
Right? So there is that consideration on sort of the private cloud, like, how do you get your supply chain optimized? how do you get your data center automation optimized to be as just in time as possible, right? It's a different set of constraints and considerations. But then when you get to public cloud, right, the costs are typically much higher here in public cloud when you measure the sort of the cost of unit compute or the cost of unit storage, right? And you can burn this up really quickly if you don't have the right controls in place, the pane of glass to help explain to engineers and to businesses, what are you, spending and what are you getting? And that requires a lot of, tooling and automation. But then it also needs you to build elasticity into your infrastructure that lets you auto scale your services. You got to lean in on your data science muscles to start to understand and forecast traffic patterns so that you're able to auto scale up or down, just in time or near time. And with a simple goal of, hyper efficient utilization, right? We are used to seeing, 25, 30% utilization on a private cloud, right? That is just not an option on a public cloud, right? Simply because on the one, you're overcapitalized, on the other, you really want to operate just in time and you want to operate with an auto-scaled infrastructure.
Okay, thank you. So Chris, let me just come to you with a question that runs in almost all the conferences that I have. How has the pandemic made a difference in your transformation plans? What has been easy? What has been difficult in that?
I will tell you, I actually think it's been actually very insightful for us as we're going through our transformation because of a couple of different reasons. As all of us today, we're all working differently than we were a year and a half ago. But what we're seeing is a couple of different things. First, our customers are expecting different services from us. I mean, Hari mentioned his business. They've been an industry leader in the United States around how they're providing services to their customers. And we're trying to do the same and trying to understand how are people using our services? What do they need in this new way of operating because of the pandemic? So it's forced us to think of opportunities that we wouldn't have addressed in the past. And we've also had to, the pandemic, because we're all virtual, has actually exposed some of our process vulnerabilities. Vulnerabilities from the point that there's oftentimes someone in the middle. There's a person in the middle of a process that you have, whether it's logistics or financials or even servicing the customer in some way. You don't realize it when you're all together in a facility because it just kind of happens throughout the day. When you're virtual, you start to find out that your automation has chasms between it, right? You have an automated portion and then there's a wait time for somebody to either approve or move it forward. The pandemic and our need to work remotely has forced us to be able to expose some of those through value stream mappings and other things like that. So our automated processes now are much more end-to-end, and the speed of which we're doing innovation now is much faster than what it was when we were together in the building. It's an amazing dichotomy that happened. You would think it would be the opposite, but it's actually accelerated our innovation.
Very good, very good. So Chris, just a follow-up to that, you went through a lot, you fixed a lot of things. What do you see the future going to? What should you be preparing for the future as the industry moves in?
For us, we started the conversation with green IT, right? We have got to get to a point where we have infrastructure as code, right? We get down to the elasticity that was referenced earlier. I loved, and I wrote it down, the hyper efficient utilization. We have got to be, as an industry, hunters versus gatherers as far as how we actively manage our environments that are out there, and really use these patterns and these least common denominators as an accelerator for our developers to be brilliant. Our developers should not be worried about what brand of server they're running on or what location they're running on. That should be completely obfuscated from them. And as they're using infrastructure as code, they're able to focus more on features and rapid delivery at a very low cost. They can spin things up, tear them down, experiment, and do a variety of things using the services that we're able to provide them now. But it forces my organization to think differently around the services we provide, because it's a much more software-driven data center approach now than it's ever been.
Thank you, Chris. Great insights. Hari, let me just ask you a question, right? The question was, what is the partnership you would want from the infrastructure vendors? What should they be focusing on as we move forward?
Yeah, no, thanks for that. You know, I think this sort of ties in with sort of where is the industry going? You know, there is sort of, you know, I'm going to speak to both sort of private cloud as well as public cloud for a moment, right? Because for the foreseeable future, we're going to see both continue to thrive. And, you know, if you look at any major supplier to both the hyperscaler data centers as well as to enterprise data centers, you're going to see on the one hand, the addressable market for hyperscalers over, say, the next 5 years is roughly, you know, $1.5 to $2 trillion, right, in terms of the vendor marketplace. But interestingly, if you look at the enterprise data centers, the addressable market for enterprise data centers and for enterprise computing needs is almost twice that, right? And that is sort of the forecast through to 2030. So what this means is that for companies like Dell or HP, or there's a number of other new players, right? Nokia is in the data center business, right? NVIDIA is in the data center business, right? So there's a number of current and emerging players in the data center business. And so when you think about private cloud, I would really encourage, you know, all of our partners to think about open standards. You know, we have operated for a really long time with proprietary hardware, with specialized designs, you know, all the way from, you know, rack design to sort of power supply design to even the nuts and bolts that hold the machines in place on those racks, right? I think we've come a long way since, and I think if we want to get hyper efficient in our private data centers, we need to consider projects like, you know, the Open Compute project is one example. I think Linux Foundation is trying to do something similar. But OCP, by and large, has become one of the more predominant open standards, primarily because while it started at Facebook, it now has support from Amazon, it has support from Google, it has support from Microsoft, right? And these are the three largest cloud platforms in the world today, right? And they're obviously, you know, when you talk about China, there is, you know, we do have other companies that enter this realm to round out the top 5, but you'd be surprised to hear that even companies in China are part of standards like the Open Compute project. Like Inspur is one example of a large supplier who's part of this. So Target actually is one of the first major US retailers to join the Open Compute project, right? We joined this earlier this year. We have been running our first sets of hardware from the OCP project. These are co-designed hardware, purpose-built in our data centers, you know, from a power delivery, power conversion, you know, not having to do the 48 volt, 12 volt conversion, the thermal energy efficiencies, and then the cost reduction with commodity hardware. We're seeing, you know, almost closer to like 32-33% of cost reduction. We're seeing closer to 25% in energy efficiency at the rack level, mostly because of the conversion efficiencies that I talked about. But then as we retrofit for our data centers, you know, we could see as much as 35% energy efficiency. Water is another big asset, right? And with everything that's happening with global warming, there's this seminal book that was written in the 70s. I think it was called Water Wars. And there was even a movie from that time period, which kind of escapes me, Chris. Which really talked about
Kevin Costner, Water World.
Yeah.
So there is quite a, there are quite a few predictions out there, right? Science fiction, movie fandom, and just general fiction. But then we now have enough modeling to tell us a lot of these scenarios are not far off, right? We maybe have 15 years, 20 years to sort of contain those before they spiral out of control, right? We got to stop the 2 degree, centigrade burn down, right? That's really what we've got to mitigate. But then when we talk about sort of, transposing that to public cloud, I do believe that our partners need to think about the multi-cloud. They do need to think about how do you enable platforms and services to run across the multi-cloud. It's no longer efficient to build a capability or a platform, whether it's a key value store or whether it's a graph query system, and it only runs on your own cloud offering, or it only runs, Google, Azure, are, two of our largest partners. And I've been in conversations with both of them recently, and both of them have talked about how they do want their services to run across the multi-cloud. Google, for example, they've talked about, opening up Anthos, right? And enabling you to manage your service clusters across, not just Google's data centers, but also in AWS, and they have a public preview right now, and pretty quick later this year in Azure, right? So that's a great example, and we want to see more of that. There's also data portability, right? It's not enough for you to be able to very quickly build your applications on a public cloud. I think one of the better examples of what's been happening is what Dropbox has gone through, right? Dropbox started as a public cloud first platform, and over the last 3 years, they've had to stand up a colo system, right? Simply because they realized that the cost of compute and the cost of storage was so exorbitant that they had to go to a colo strategy and sort of make that part of their infrastructure journey in order for them to grow profitably as a company. Otherwise, they would be spending 80%, 90% of their revenues just into public cloud, right?
Yeah, thank you.
So
sorry, I'm getting a signal on the time. Sorry about that, Hari.
No, thank you.
But great insights, Hari and Chris. So we heard from both of them on how large enterprise balances the needs for customization, security, and the optimization through the cloud, the challenges they face, the benefits, and how, I like the word, be hunters, not gatherers, and about hyper efficiency and everything. Great inputs, a great conversation. I would have gone on forever, but for the time constraint. Thank you both. No,
thank you both. And Sudha, as you saw, I was probably ready to go on forever. But again, I really appreciate the platform. Chris and Sudha, it was a pleasure.
Thank you.
It's a pleasure for me. Thank you, Chris.
Chris and Hari, like Sudha said, great insights then. That was a great conversation. Thank you, Sudha, Chris, and Hari, for that very informative discussion on the topic, the cloud advantage, arena IT, and scale.